one of the toys that I keep in my travel bag all the time is this right here. It's a HackRF One PortaPack. I use it to listen to airplanes, to my electrical meter or utility meters, to boats, to a bunch of different things. Today, we're going to take you through how to set it up, how to flash the firmware, how to set up the SD card, and all of the different ways that you can do that. Hello, I'm Michael Smith. I'm a CTO, cybersecurity type, Chief Information Security Officer, Security Manager, Engineer. Sam, who are you?
I'm Sam Schneider, and I'm here with Mike today. Looking forward to this SDR conversation. I'm an architect, engineer, sales engineer, so I like to have fun too, especially at DEF CON.
So, as I mentioned before, I carry one of these with me. Sometimes if I'm going to a big security conference, I'll carry two of these. But I usually carry one of these inside of my backpack because it has a lot of things that you can do just when you're on the road, right? You can go listen to a lot of signals. You can also transmit some signals. So my normal pack bag is I have one of these. I have a little telescopic antenna, right? So it goes to that length, not overly huge, but it's nice and portable, and I can put it in a bag, so hand for scale. I can put this in my bag, not a problem. And then one other thing, which is this, nothing special here. It is a RFID hotel card that I have hacked, literally, physically hacked it with a pair of sharp scissors in order to use it as a guard for the button here. If I put it in there.
Yeah, I really like that, by the way, man. I love that.
It's a cheap, it's not 100% effective, but I slide it like that in front of the main button because when I throw this into a bag or I throw it into my backpack, it's very common that the button gets pushed. And when the button gets pushed, it'll turn on and turn off inside of your bag. Okay. So it's really just to protect battery life. That's all, right? But I have this, and this travels with me all the time. Now, what is a PortaPack? What's a HackRF? So it all starts with a guy named Michael Osman. He runs a company called Great Scott Gadgets, and he developed this device here, which is called a HackRF One. Now, a HackRF One is a software-defined radio. Okay, so just like it says on the tin, it is a radio that is controlled by software, and it needs a software component in order to decode the signal. So these things have been around, and one of the really cool selling points of the HackRF One is that it can receive and transmit in simplex, so it can either receive or transmit at one time. It can't do both at the same time. But it can receive and transmit up to 6 gigahertz per second. Or excuse me, 6 gigahertz.
You have to be really careful with that. And you're not allowed to just transmit to your heart's extent, especially if you don't have a license to do so. FCC frowns upon that. So you don't want to be going out there and playing with this in an open environment, especially near airports. Very bad idea.
Yeah, most of the receiving component or most of the receiving applications are fairly benign. It's the transmit ones that will get you into trouble. Okay. But the HackRF was really good, and people started to use it for a lot of security purposes and also just for lab testing equipment, right? You can experiment with a lot of radio stuff. You can analyze a lot of radio signals, and it was really good for that. But then somebody came along and created the PortaPack and open sourced the design. And if you look at it, from the side here, it's really the HackRF One is the bottom part of this. So if I show you this, right, same kind of layout there where you've got the USB and you've got the two SMA adapters. And then on the other side, you've got some buttons and some status LEDs, right? So they took the HackRF One. The HackRF One itself is open source hardware. They took that and they added everything you see here on the top. So they added a single board computer microcontroller. They added a touchpad LCD. They added the 4-way directional pad with the OK button in the center, and they added a dial with the push button. It's a push button. So they added all of that and made this one comprehensive unit. Oh, and then they added a battery, right? So there's a header on there, and you can attach a battery to it. So they made the PortaPack really as something that you can, like I do, throw in your bag, take with you wherever you're at, and you can go analyze signals. Okay. It's really good for some things, so other things, not so much. Okay. But it's there and it's good, and we use it. We use it a lot. Okay.
Yeah, I think the same rule applies, Mike. Think of it like a Wireshark, but it's a physical device you're holding. It's always okay to do passive things, right?
Yeah.
You can listen, you can, look in the air, you can see what signals are around you and so forth. But it's when you start changing things or when you start transmitting things that bad things can happen. So passive is okay. Same general rule.
Yep. So the question is, where do you get these? Okay, so you just go to eBay, you search for PortaPack H2 Mayhem. H2 is the hardware build. There is an H3 that's out there that somebody's selling. I saw one here just a second ago. It's got a little different pad, looks a little bit different. I see it. This guy right here. Okay, so this is an H3. So it says H3. Those don't work with Mayhem. Okay. Mayhem is the firmware and a set of applications that allows you to, read or receive and transmit signals. So you just go look for PortaPack H2. So H2 is the hardware build, and then Mayhem, which is the firmware. And you can go buy these. Now, these used to be, so during the COVID era, I was paying $210 to $220 per unit. It looks like the price has gone down quite a bit, but just like everything on eBay, understand who the seller is, where they're shipping from. I usually prefer shippers that are inside the United States, but almost all of them, the components are made in China, right? Also, you get some like this one that comes with antennas. So it comes with a couple different antennas of different size. Honestly, for most purposes, until you get really nerdy with it, you need an antenna, right? A telescopic antenna is about all.
Yeah, telescopic is going to work for you.
Okay. When you do look for antennas and other accessories for it, it does have an SMA connector. Okay. This one comes with a filter. So there's your that's either an up converter or a filter. So something like this, that is, here's a telescoping antenna. There's a telescoping antenna, a unit, a USB cable. Totally cool. That's just about everything you need. The other thing that I look for is I almost always buy a metal case. There are some people who say that the metal case blocks some of the signal. Okay. But if me being a recovering infantryman, if I throw things into my backpack, it has to be durable because otherwise I will break it to pieces. That's just me. Your mileage may vary.
I like to drop mine a lot, so
you drop it.
Metal works a little bit better in those scenarios.
Fair. Okay. So that's how to buy, and you just buy one, wait for it to arrive, and you've got it. There are places like Hackers Warehouse that sells them. You can buy just the hardware and buy the HackRF One from Great Scott Gadgets, and you can build your own. So you just take pieces together, take it apart, they stick together. It's just like assembling your own Raspberry Pi and adding stuff into the GPIO. It's pretty easy to do. So you can buy kits that convert a regular HackRF One. So something like this, right? Where here's the board with all the controller. This is what the back side of it looks like. So you buy that. You can buy an individual case. You can buy the battery. They just stick together like a Raspberry Pi GPIO or an Arduino GPIO. You just fit it together, slide it into the case, and screw the case together. not very hard to assemble your own. But what we want to go through today is setting this up and getting ready to use it to actually receive signals. Okay. Now, the firmware itself that we use is called Mayhem. The link is in the video description. I actually have a couple links there. The firmware itself started out as a piece of firmware called Havoc. Then that was forked like open source software does. That created the software called Mayhem. Mayhem is under active development. In fact, maybe every 3 to 6 months, there's a new version that gets released, and it has new resources, new applications. We will actually use some of the new capabilities because the last release made it really easy to go in and manage the device.
Boy, I really like what they've done with it too.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely like it. It's working out really well. But it's a bunch of open source software. If you scroll down, there's the beginner's guide. There's a bunch of other stuff. They actually go through how to make sure that you're buying the right PortaPack hardware, because it's not compatible with all. So there's a compatibility list, what to look for. And they have instructions on how to update the firmware. Usually when you get a PortaPack, your firmware is going to be outdated simply because it was shipped to you. We're recording this in July of 2024. The current version of firmware is version 2.0.1. There is a wiki for Mayhem itself, and the link will be down in the video description. Okay. And specifically what I'm showing here is the flash instructions, how to update the firmware and how to update the SD card. Okay. Also, if you look over here on the right-hand side of the wiki, you'll see a bunch of different things. So here are the applications here and all of the different receiver applications that you can run, all of the transmitter applications, same legal caveat applies there. Don't be a dumb criminal, don't go to jail. And what utilities it has. Okay, and then how to change the settings, how to manage it. Basically, the wiki tells all. It's actually really good. Although sometimes if they have a brand new feature, it might not make it to the wiki yet.
Yeah, Mike,
Okay.
one thing you might want to point out is that every time you update the firmware, you need to go in and manually update the SD card software as well. Now, this website we're going to show you as of version 2.00 allows you to automatically update the firmware via the site. It's pretty daggone cool. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But the SD card stuff is still manual. And they have two variations of this. You want to roll down to that site real quick?
Yeah, it's
right.
It is right here. So in order to get to the firmware, you go to the update firmware page, you scroll down, and here is where it says here firmware. Funny enough, there's a link to the firmware. You just click on the current version that shows up. Now, if you scroll down, there are a bunch of different commits as people added to the individual release. But if you scroll down, there's files down at the bottom. You have the firmware.zip right here. That's the actual firmware and some utilities for flashing it in Windows. I'll go through that, show you how to manually update from Linux. Then we'll update it from the web application, which is really cool. And we'll update it from the SD card.
Yeah, okay. Literally, it's I mean, not the SD card, right? We have to actually manually copy that. But like in Windows, Mike mentioned Linux, but like in Windows, it's simply a batch file. You hook it up via USB, you put it into your HackRF mode, and then you can update it, the firmware that way. Right? Very, very easy to do. On the SD cards, I want you to notice something here. You have two variations. You have one with no world map, which is like the ADS-B side, right? It's not going to show you a map. That takes out a lot of bulk, right? So if you go to the one right underneath, and I always use the second one because I want to see what's around me, right? When I'm looking at ADSB mapping, um, that 400 meg file that's zipped roughly translates to 2.25 gigs of data. So just be prepared. It's a process and it takes a little bit of time sometimes to copy off. I would highly recommend you use a class 10 SD card in your device, but you're still going to be limited to your USB, and it's typically USB 2 speeds. So it's fairly slow.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we've implied, but we haven't said explicitly, which is that when you update your PortaPack, there are two different pieces to update, right? So one is the firmware, and the firmware is, think of firmware as an operating system plus all of the applications in it. So that gives you all of the utilities to send, receive, manage the device. The SD card has a lot of resources that the applications in the firmware use. So for instance, there are a bunch of files there that have ranges of frequencies to make the scanner work. You have a map for ADSB, which helps you locate planes. And if you have the map installed, you can actually see where the plane is looking at a map. Okay. So it's all these different resources that the individual applications use. Do you need the SD card or the contents on the SD card? You don't really, but it makes it a lot nicer. And the contents on the SD card are, for the most part, they're text files. Like the map is different, but for the most part, they're text files. And so that allows you to go in and you can create your own ranges of frequencies. You can create your own load sets. You can create a bunch of other resources and put them on the SD card and put them on your own device. Okay. So I'm going to download the firmware and the version with the map. So I'm just going to copy the link address here. I just created a temporary file. Yay, blur, blur, blur. But I'm going to wget trophy. Ooh, really? Fine, be that way. Copy link address. Okay, so there you go. But I got extra because it's HTML. So got a little bit of extra. We'll get there. Boom. Okay. So there you go. I grabbed that one, and then I want to grab the other one, which is this one. Link address, and then get paste. Oh, that one. Gave me that one clean.
Wow, okay. That's so much quicker than the Windows download. All that GUI bloat.
Yeah, I'm also on gigabit fiber internet, so
yeah.
So things get fast for me. So now if you just do an ls, I've got a couple different files, and you just unzip them. Right, and you'll see it dumps it all inside of the parent directory. So normally what you want to do is you want to just make a directory firmware. Copy damn firmware, see, firmware, ls, and then just do the same insert. Cool. Okay. So there you go. Now, what you'll see in here is a bunch of different things. Here's a Windows driver. You have the Flash PortaPack Mayhem.bat. Really, really easy. It's just a batch file. What it does is it checks to see you actually have the .bin file is your firmware, and then it runs under utilities. There's a HackRF update.exe, and it calls that and says, here's the firmware, and it does this job. Okay, it basically writes that firmware to the ROM on the device. Okay, inside of Linux, there's a cool utility. If we just do app cache search HackRF, okay, app cache search. Yeah, I gotta spell it right. HackRF. Okay. And what you'll see here is you have this piece of software or this package called HackRF. And so you just do sudo apt-get install RF. Oh, it asks you for your password. Password is password. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to install it. Okay. But there it is. Now, that comes with a bunch of utilities. If we just do hack tab, you'll see I've got the SPI flash, which is what we'll use, but I've got a couple things to set the clock, a thing to grab information from the device, the transfer, which is how you read a signal and write it to a file, or read a file and transmit as a signal. Okay, so that way you can record. HackRF transfer you'll use a lot. But the one that I want to use is SPI flash, and then -W, if I remember correctly. Let me check and make sure.
So you always refer back.
-W, right? It's in the Linux instructions. You put it's new firmware file.bin, and so it should be right there under my ls. Let me ls first. Okay. HackRF SPI flash -W, and it is this monster right here. So PortaPack. One last step that you have to do, which is in the PortaPack itself, you have utilities. So you go to the main screen, you go down to utilities. You put it in utilities? Nope. They put it in HackRF. So there's just a button there that says HackRF. You hit that. It says, yes, do you want to put this in HackRF mode? The PortaPack piece won't work. You say yes. And now I'm ready to go flash it. So just hit return. And you'll see, oh yeah, it's writing. And when it's done, it'll say, oh yeah, I wrote so many bytes. You pull the plug out of the device, plug it back in, and it will boot up. So this is from my HackRF PortaPack. Now, in order to get it into flash mode, you just hit, you just go from the default screen into the application. So you just hit the center one, or you hit the button here. You go down here to HackRF, push that. It says, yes, we're going to put it into HackRF mode, and it won't be responsive to anything you do on the screen. And you say yes. Then we come in and we flash it. Okay, I'm going to flash it again. Okay, and it's that easy. It's literally that easy. Now, a couple warnings here, caveats. What I will do here, stop screen sharing. Okay. When you put it into HackRF mode, you'll see it gives you this display here. This shows you what all the filters are. So the amplifiers that are built into the device, that's what it's supposed to show you, but I'm not I'm not grabbing any signals right now, so it's not showing anything. All you have to do is pull the plug, and you'll see it will plug back in. When you plug it in, when you pull the plug and plug it in, it will do a power reset. If it doesn't come on, the display doesn't come on, what you need to do is turn it off. Okay, just double hit the button here. Double hit the dial button. Hold the left button and then hit the button and turn it on. Okay. Right. After an upgrade, it's very common for the device to forget what screen resolution it's using. It's a known issue. It doesn't happen to me all the time, but it happens enough that I go, oh my God, what did I do? And then I have to go research and figure out how to do it. Okay. But it's just a simple hold the left button. If the left button doesn't work, do the same with the right button. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to upgrade the SD card. So in order to upgrade the SD card, I want to plug this into the USB. USB is plugged into my computer, obviously. And you want to go into the menu here. You want to go down to Utilities. Sure. Utilities for SD over USB. And what that does, it'll give you a warning. What that does is it attaches that USB directly to your computer, just like it's a USB flash drive. So going into my operating system here, you'll see I have 32 gigabyte volume that was immediately, it was mounted directly by the operating system. The SD card mode is a little bit slow. And what you'll see is I've got ADSB, IIS, apps, etc. Those are all the support files. So if I go back into my command line here, I'm just going to go up. I'm going to make a directory of SD card. I'm going to move Mayhem copy to SD card.zip to SD card ls. Okay, CD SD card. Boom, there it is. Unzip Mayhem. Ooh, it'll take a little bit. There's the world map. The world map is big. Okay, while that's deflating, I'm going to go back here into this 32 gig volume, and I'm just going to go down and do a select all, move to trash, delete. Okay, now I got all these things that are unpacked. I can go over here and say new window. Yeah, we are getting just as easy as SD card. Take all these, take all these. There we go here. Don't grab that one. Don't grab the zip file that's got the drag that and drop it into the SD card. It takes a little bit. Yeah, it's big, right? But so a couple nuances to this. One is that you're using a serial protocol. Okay, so that PortaPack connects as a serial device, and the USB drive or the SD card connects as a USB drive. It's pretty slow. Now, most of the time when I copy over the SD card, what I'm doing is I pop the SD card out of my PortaPack. I use a USB SD card reader, pop it directly into my computer and move the files across. That's a much faster way, especially if you have a faster SD card, you have a faster SD card reader, and you have a faster USB port. That makes it a lot easier to move files across. But Sam, you want to show us how you update your PortaPack?
Yeah, absolutely. So mine's a little bit different. I download the same package that Mike downloaded, but I use a different instruction set. So where Mike was actually using apt-get to update the firmware in his system, I'm actually using the batch file. So I'll share my screen really quick here with you. I'm going to show you a couple of things that I'm looking at. Okay, so this is the batch file that I run on a Windows system. This, once you unzip the firmware update, it will actually have this batch file sitting out here. This is the Flash PortaPack Mayhem batch file that we're looking at. And it basically just goes through and runs a utils HackRF executable against this bin file. That's all it's doing. And it's going to go out and it's going to discover, it's going to look for your device first. Always make sure that you have actually set it up in your HackRF mode. Once you do that, boom, you're good to go. Now, that's good up until version 2.00. Once you're on version 2.00, then you have another option. And we're going to go over that here in a minute. Copying to the SD card is exactly the same, right? You actually set up the SD to USB the same way Mike demonstrated if you want to do it graphically, or you pop out the SD card and you copy over that same copy to SD card file that Mike demonstrated earlier, right? Same exact thing, and it's all listed under the wiki for the PortaPack, and we'll make sure that that's available on the links that we provide. So, without further ado, let's get into some really cool stuff here. I'm going to go into a site called hackrf.app. And what that's going to show you is that they have actually created this nifty little automated way to update your firmware. So what you're looking at now is a live version of my H2 PortaPack. This is exactly what you're seeing on here. At this point I can use the buttons on my PortaPack, or I can use these buttons as well. If I click on this, it'll actually go out and it'll actually be able to update. Click. Sorry, wrong thing. And then we can see all of the really cool buttons out here. And this is tactile, so it'll actually respond to anything you click on, right? And that's very, very cool at the end of the day. Okay, so one of the things I want to show you here real quick, a very cool feature that they've added, is you no longer have to go through that manual process to update your firmware. Once you have version 2.0.0 stable, 2.0.0 stable, you can actually go out and flash your firmware through this site, which is very cool. I love this feature.
Yeah, I like it. It saves a lot of pain for people.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to go out there and unzip files and move them around. One caveat to this: it does not yet do the SD card copy yet. It would be really, really cool to see that. But I currently have 2.00 on here stable, and I'm going to select 2.0. We're going to go out here and look at it, make sure that this is what we want to do. If I were actually doing this, I would read through the release notes, make sure everything's cool with it on the back end as well, right? So just from this point, I've already done that. I already know what I'm getting into when I update this. I'm going to go ahead and just press update to latest stable release, and that is listed here.
And you'll actually see behind that window, you'll see the scrolling text output. That's the actual writing as it writes bit by bit to the ROM. It'll give you the status update as it writes each byte.
All right, it uploaded the ROM. That's very, very cool. So we'll close that down, right? And we'll go back up and we'll reboot the device. And you see we have version 2.0 on here currently, right? So I'm going to refresh the device real quick. Sometimes this
takes a little bit to come up, yeah.
This interaction can be a little hokey. I'm just, I'm very impatient. I'll go up here and I'll refresh the entire site, let it freshly reconnect to the device, and boom, there we go. So we see that Mayhem has rebooted up, and let's see if, there we go. 2.0.1 is our current firmware version. So we updated this live over the site, which is cool. But keep in mind, in order for it to be a complete update, we're also going to have to go back and update all of those files on the SD card as well for this. So, like one of the things that Mike did was basically went into utilities. And I'm going to click through it here. This is kind of cool, right? We can look at SD over USB. Now, need to tell you something here real quick. This will not work over this utility, right? Why? Because we can only hook one device serially at a time to our USB port. So if you're going to do this, you need to detach from this interface, right? And you would run this. Once again, my recommendation is take that serial card out. That SD card out and physically copy it on your computer with directories. Pretty cool, right? It's very cool. Well, no, so now I'll just exit out. I'll disconnect my USB, blah, blah, and reset. Boom. Now I should be able to actually see it and connect back to it. Boom. Connection. Voila.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there we've updated all the files on here, the ADSB files.
Yep.
Blah, blah.
Yeah, go check your version. So just hit the center button. Yeah, there you go. And you'll see you are version 2.0.1. Now, one of the things that I like to do anytime, and this is just an engineer thing, a CTO thing, a programmer thing. Anytime I make a change, I go through
verify.
what? Well, it's trust but verify, but it's user acceptance testing, right? So
yes,
I always have a little like, what's my test to make sure that this thing works?
Yeah,
right. And now, normally after I upgrade this, because I'm either at an airport or I live close to a flight path for a busy metropolitan airport, I just use the ADSB application. Sam does not. Do you have an airport? I think you have an airport, but it's small, right?
Yeah, it's actually about 3 miles away.
Okay. So you can flip an ADSB, or the other one that works really well is tuning into commercial radio, being able to grab a commercial radio signal, listen to it via your headphones plugged into the PortaPack. That also works. But you just want to test to make sure that the applications actually work.
Yeah, I'm in a bad spot right now and can't hook up my ADSB antenna, which I'd like to. So we can always go. Let's go to the ERT meter. Let's look at that. Let's see if we get anything here.
So ERT is utility meters. Right.
And I'm not seeing anything on here. I should actually. It takes a little bit of time.
It takes a little bit of time to grab them.
Yeah, with a paddle antenna, and
Mhm.
I mean, even though actually the meter is literally about 15 feet away from me on the other side of the wall.
I mean, they don't just your individual meter doesn't like, hey. It just has to do it every 5 minutes or so.
Right. That's right. So it may take a while for it to beacon out. We just want to make sure that we are indeed seeing, oh, look at this. They actually put cars on here now. That's pretty cool.
Cars. Oh yeah, TPMS.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tire pressure. It's a pressure sensor inside of your tires. So as you drive down the road, because funny enough, your tires move, you can't connect a wire, right? You can't run a wire to the tires. So they have a little device that's got a gyroscope that powers the device, and then it just transmits wirelessly what your current tire pressure is.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Now on the Linux side, the Mayhem hub still works. It's actually really cool. That's what I'm showing now. And I have my PortaPack. It's all updated. It's plugged in. All I have to do is connect the device. I get a dialog that pops up, and it says, oh, PortaPack Mayhem is on TTY ACM 0. That is the right USB device or serial device. I'm going to connect to that. Mayhem Hub will come up. If I want, because remember, a serial device, and USB is serial, it's a universal serial bus, can only be connected to one piece of software at a time. So if I want to use any other application, I have to come up here into this little pop-up here, the site settings, and you see that it shows PortaPack Mayhem on the serial port. I have to hit the X to detach that from that particular browser tab. But in this case, I just want to test that my firmware works. So I'm just going to go into the application menu, go into receive, go into ADSB, and I'm going to use LNA. I want to turn my amp on here. So you have here the left turn and the right turn. These are turn the dial up, turn the dial down. The middle is the OK. And so you'll see here, usually use the LNA of, somewhere like 20 to 32, VGA, and, 20 to 40. And you'll see here, I actually have an airplane that I tracked. You'll see some of these, I actually have locations. Some of these are just, I've listened to them in the past, and we can use the up, down, left, right buttons. We say, okay. It will actually give us details on that aircraft. Okay. As soon as I can know that I can receive a signal, I say, okay, cool. The firmware update has worked. I'm glad or happy to go use this. And I don't need to mess around anymore with this. So I'll just go up here, disconnect it. Right. Reload the page. It takes me back to the initial start page. And I've done my user acceptance testing.
Very cool, right?
And that's it for setting up your PortaPack and your HackRF One in order to receive signals. So everything that we've talked through today, how to get a PortaPack, what are the components of the PortaPack, how and where to download the firmware, several methods for upgrading the firmware, a method for updating the SD card, and then user acceptance testing to make sure that your firmware works. Thank you, everybody. I'm Michael Smith. Sam, who are you? And we shall see you all in the next video.
Take care.